Hey, thanks for stopping by. My name is Brett. Welcome to On Hand Art. Today I'm going to show you how I made some interactive art, but you're also going to see why most of my work is experimental. It's a lot of problem solving and why I almost gave up on this project. But let's get started and I'll show you why along the way. Alright, I know I said I almost gave up on this project, but almost is the key word there. And I wanted to share this project with you so that you can see that not everything's going to turn out as you hope, but that doesn't mean it's a failure. I'll explain all of this as I go, but right now what you're watching is the foundation to the biggest issue. And I'm using this trim ring that came with a ceiling light, and the mistake I made was actually using it as a circle template, and I'll explain that more as we go. To cut out the wood, I made a track with the cutoff wheel, and then I switched to a spiral cutting bit. This bit is meant for harder stuff like grout and tile, so this went pretty quickly. And this piece of wood actually came from packing something, I don't know what, and it's kind of garbage. I figure I'll just have to reinforce it later. And since I'm using this trim ring, I'm not going to have to clean up the edges. It just snaps in there. You'll never see any of that. And even though the trim ring is black, I'm just going to paint both sides matte black so that they all match. There's another trim ring that you'll see later, and I painted that one off camera. I'm using this veneer as a handle to help the viewer as they spin these discs. It's got a heat activated adhesive, so I'll just measure around each of the discs and then cut the strip to size. And then once I find and mark the midpoint along the length of the veneer, I'll cut it in half with my shears. And I'm cutting them in half because otherwise they're way too wide and delicate. And then I'll iron them together to give them even more strength. I did try ironing them directly to the discs, but that just didn't work. So I'm using a clear caulk instead. So with the strips taped on, I added a ring of tape on the inside. Now this way, when I spread the caulk, I can peel off the tape and leave a nice clean edge. But moving on to finding the center of the discs to cut a hole, the trick is to draw two angled lines, and then at the midpoint of each of those lines, draw a perpendicular line. Where those lines meet, that's the center. And then you turn the piece and repeat the process, and I didn't do that, which is why I didn't know these are actually ovals and not circles. Anyway, instead of trying to drill thin plastic, I've learned it's best to use a cone grinding bit and my rotary tool. You'll get a cleaner edge without the chip out that a drill bit will give you. With my center holes cut, I laid a disc on the backer and then transferred that center point so I could drill the hole for the spindle. Before I get to that though, I'm using a Costco pie lid to reinforce this kind of garbagey plywood. So with a little construction adhesive, I have a more solid-ish backer. It's better than it was before. And with that backer glued into the trim ring, I can glue on the spindle. That's just a handle from a foam brush that I cut to length and then I check that it's level. And the reason I'm using so much construction adhesive is because one, I have it, but also that all of these materials are different and I want to ensure that I'm using something that glues them together. I save these sheets of paint by peeling them off of mixing trays after I'm done with other paintings. They stick to pretty much everything, including each other, so I'm storing them in parchment paper, but once I get them in place where I want them, all I have to do is just give them a gentle press and they'll stick to the plastic discs. And I'm using discs I cut from sheets of foam packing just to separate all of the discs in the backer, and that will also keep them from moving until someone actually rotates them. This is also where I discovered that each of these discs is actually an oval, and that's why we measure circles from the center out. They definitely look circular, but they're off just enough that the discs get out of alignment, and then you can see the edge of one or the other when you turn them. I'm adding a sheet of this reflective vinyl because I didn't like how dark the painted area looked with just the matte black. This is a sheet of t-shirt iron-on that we discovered didn't work very well, so I added it to my collection of stuff, and I'm glad I have a use for it now. I also only need the top half of the backer to be fully covered, so that's how I'm figuring out the placement, and I'm gluing it in place with more construction adhesive before pressing it into place and adding the paint discs back on. Now this actually might be my favorite part of this piece, mostly because it came out the way I pictured. This is the blue sky area under an arched canopy of the spinning paint leaves. The only trick here is to make sure that the paint is opaque. And you can do that by either painting the back with something slightly darker than the front, or you could just paint nice and thick, which is what I do here to get some nice texture. The more I saw the flaws in this piece, I thought about trying to disassemble it and get everything more round. One thing that I thought would happen though is the discs would be too small and you'd definitely see their edges more than you do now. And then plus having used construction adhesive, I'm pretty sure I would damage all that thin plastic. And that's one of the downsides of using found objects, is that you don't have any more of the materials that you use. I don't usually give up on a project because, well, if nothing else, I've learned how not to do something, but usually I'll think of a way to do it better next time or for another piece. So this piece will go in storage as inspiration for something else, and I actually might be able to use those materials in the future if I think of something. But if you enjoyed this video, let me know by hitting the like button and subscribing. Not only does that mean a lot to me, but I'd love to have you as part of the on-hand art community. And if you do like this video, I'll leave a link to one that YouTube also thinks you'll like. But thanks for watching, and remember, you are creative.